Santa Incubus Tales Conquers the Martians, a storybook adventure written and read by Hushcho, illustrated by Hushcho and Kia. Based on the film Santa Claus Conquers the Martians by Glenville Marath and Paul L. Jacobs. Once upon a time, in a magical shop called Fantasies, there was an incubus named Jar and a clockwork lad named Ur. Santa Claus is coming soon, Jar told Ur. He will bring presents to all of the good people in the world. Ur was fascinated. He didn't know Santa Claus at all because he was delivered to Fantasies at the New Year. He had missed the Yuletide season. Jar continued his story. Santa Claus lives at the North Pole in a beautiful house with his wife Mrs. Claus. All year long, Santa works with his elves to make gifts for the good people of the world. Then Jar held up a finger. But these aren't the tall, fair elves that I have those magazines of. Oh, Ur replied. There are different elves? Jar nodded his head. Yes, these are toy-making elves that live at the North Pole with Santa. But not every gift that Santa leaves is a toy. Sometimes Santa gives gifts that aren't even things. Wow, Ur gasped in surprise. What does that mean, Mister? Mister was Ur's special name for Jar. He had learned the word from the knockers, fairies who were best at machinery, and who had made Ur. Jar wrapped his arms around Ur and kissed his forehead. It means that sometimes Santa Claus gives people a feeling of hope, or happiness, or a kind memory. Sometimes Santa's gift is that of a light in the darkness of winter. Ur giggled and rested his head on Jar's shoulder. But, Mister, you said darkness is good, isn't it? Yes, Jar answered. But this light is symbolic. The days are short and the nights are long. But in many ways that represents life too. Sometimes, when things are darkest, people need a light, even a little twinkling light, to remind them that there is hope and there is good. Oh, Mister, Ur replied, that is so romantic. For a little while longer they stayed there, embracing, and then Jar squeezed Ur and kissed him again. Well, you'd better get to the bakery so you can get back before lunch. I'll fix something wonderful. Ur clapped his hands and bounced in place. Oh, yes, I will run to the bakery and get the fruit tarts for tea. And so Ur got his mittens and pulled them on. Even though he didn't really need mittens, he liked the way they looked and felt. Jar had given them to him, so they were very special. He always wanted to wear them. I will be back soon, Mister, Ur called out, waving to Jar and stepping out of the shop. Be safe, my little love, Jar called back. Then, once Ur had left, Jar began to plan. He would take Fantasies to the North Pole while Ur was away, and ask Santa Claus himself if he could bring Ur for a very special visit. Ur hummed to himself as he walked down the street. The bakery wasn't far away, so it wouldn't take him very long. He liked the winter because he loved snow. Jar loved it too. He said it was magical, and that it was like a blanket of silence on the world. As Ur turned a corner, he found himself facing space ray guns. He gasped and covered his mouth with his hands, scared at what he saw. Green men with antennae. We don't want to hurt you, one said. I am Kimar of Mars. We have come for the help of one of your Santa Clauses. But, Ur replied, there is only one Santa Claus, and he lives at the North Pole. Kimar looked at Voldar, the Martian standing beside him. Voldar was more muscular and had a mustache. We see many Santa Clauses in your cities, Kimar gently said to Ur. They are just his helpers. Ur smiled, lowering his hands and puffing out his chest a little bit. He was proud because Jar had told him earlier when he had asked the same thing. Kimar nodded once and turned to leave. We go to the North Pole, then. Voldar reached out and roughly tugged at Ur's arm. Ur didn't like that. I cannot go with you. I have to go to the bakery for Mister. He batted at Voldar's hand, but gently. Since Ur was made of mithril, he could hurt regular humans if he hit them too hard. You will come with us willingly, or we will stun you with our space ray and take you along with us anyway, Voldar sneered, lifting his space ray gun at Ur. Voldar, Kimar shouted, leave him alone. And leave him here to alert the Earth authorities? Voldar's finger tightened on the trigger. We can't afford that risk, and you know it. Kimar thought about this and sighed, nodding his head. You're right. Please come with us, Earthling. My name is Ur called out, looking back down the street sadly. Well, only for a little while, but you must promise me that I will be back in time for tea. Meanwhile, Jar strolled out at the North Pole. He was wearing his favorite winter coat. It was much like his other favorite, red with fluffy trim, but this one had white trim. It reminded him of Santa's coat. He patted the outside wall of fantasies and walked through the snow to Santa's workshop, happy and smiling. But when he stepped in, it was a different story. A robot rampaged all around the workshop. Toys were scattered everywhere, and the elves were running around in fright. Mrs. Claus didn't know what to do. Jar summoned his thorn whip and began to fight with the robot. It shot lightning from its hands at Jar, but he was too quick even for lightning. The two continued to fight. Suddenly, Ur came in the door and stood in shock. Mister! He called out. Help Santa Claus! Jar shouted to him. Don't worry about me. Okay, Ur answered, and he ran to the man with the beautiful white beard and the jolly red suit. However, the Martians were close behind. They pointed their guns at Ur and Santa. Santa Claus, you're coming with us, Kimar ordered. Voldar shot his space ray gun at one of the elves who was too close. The elf froze in place. Santa looked very sad. Oh, why did you have to do that to my helper? It's harmless, Kimar replied. It'll wear off in a little while. You must come with us, Santa. We need you on Mars, and we won't take no for an answer. Ur stepped in front of Santa, spreading his arms out. I won't let you take Santa Claus, he shouted at them. But Santa smiled to Ur and wrapped an arm protectively around his shoulders. It's all right, Ur. Ur was surprised that Santa knew his name. I'll go with you. It's okay. Just don't hurt any more of my friends. The Martians took Santa and Ur away, leaving the robot to deal with Jar and Mrs. Claus. Mister! Ur called out. I love you. I love you, Ur, Jar replied. At that moment, Mrs. Claus stepped up next to Jar. She smiled at the robot, and suddenly it stopped attacking. Why, Mrs. Claus said, that's the biggest toy I've ever seen. Jar looked out the open door to see the Martian spaceship take off. He sighed, and his whip vanished again. He winced as he felt a pain in his arm. Are you all right, dearie? Mrs. Claus touched Jar's arm, and suddenly the pain was gone. Thank you, Jar replied. I am now. But they've taken Ur and Santa Claus. I have to get them back, and I'm not sure if I could direct my shop to exactly where it needs to go. Mrs. Claus placed her hand on his shoulder and smiled again. It's all right. The elves and I can make you a real rocket ship. With a little Yuletide magic, you can go rescue Papa and your friend Ur. Jar smiled too. Thank you, Mrs. Claus. Now while we do that, she said, you sit down and have a nice cup of cocoa and a cookie. You look like you aren't eating enough. On the Martian spaceship, Ur was a little sad, but Santa Claus was trying to cheer him up. Just as Santa was telling jokes, one of the Martians came in with some food pills. Hello, Santa Claus. Hello, Ur. I'm Droppo. Droppo smiled and set his tray down. What are these? Ur asked, reaching out to pick up one of the pills. Droppo pointed to it. These are food pills. They provide you with the nutrition you need and a nice taste. They don't take up much space, and space is a pretty big commodity on Mars. Pills for dinner, Santa laughed, patting his stomach. Oh me, oh my. Droppo, what's wrong on Mars? Why are they taking us to Mars? Droppo looked very sad and sat down beside Santa on the little couch. Santa and Ur were kept in a small room, but it was comfortable. The children of Mars are very unhappy, Santa, Dropo explained. They don't eat. They barely sleep. They hardly react to anything. We asked the wise man Chochum about it, and he said they weren't being allowed to be children. They needed a Santa Claus. So Chief Kimar decided to come to Earth and bring you to Mars. Santa shook his head. Goodness me, I only hope I can make a difference. But you know what? I'm going to try my best. Then he laughed. Ho, ho, ho! Santa's smiling face made Ur and Dropo laugh too. Ho, ho, ho! All the laughter made the others wonder what they were talking about. Soon everyone on the ship was laughing. Everyone, that is, except Voldar. He was very grumpy and didn't like Santa. He thought that the Martians should all be warriors and fight all the time. He didn't want people to give or receive presents. He didn't see the use in laughter or kindness. But soon Santa and were treated as honored guests rather than captives. At the North Pole, Mrs. Claus and the elves helped Jar with plenty of supplies for his trip. They packed up the rocket ship and then went inside the workshop. Mrs. Claus picked up the receiver and spoke to Jar over the radio. Jar, are you ready to take off? I'm ready. Jar put his goggles on. Count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. Mrs. Claus laughed and clapped her hands, and all the elves cheered. Drive safely, dearie. I will. Thank you, Mrs. Claus. I will bring Santa Claus and back. Jar piloted his rocket through space. As the Martian spaceship landed, Voldar tried something terrible.